Hi, my name is Russ York. I am pardon my appearance, I just came from the gym. I'm a commercial insurance broker with Liberty Insurance, not Liberty Mutual. We are a locally owned and operated brokerage, uh, born and raised right here in Pittsburgh, uh, dating back to 1950. Our brokerage focuses on commercial risk management and commercial insurance. Everything from construction to commercial real estate, hospitality, transportation, pretty broad cross section of industries that we service. Um, the risk management side of our business involves working on a more personal, more proactive level with our clients to help them better manage, mitigate, assume risks so that when uh, losses occur, that it's not quite as a catastrophic hit. So that's primarily my function with Liberty, is to look at how our businesses um, taking on a safety culture. Is it woven into their day to day work life, and how they you know screen employees, how they manage employees, how they manage losses and claims, so that they can live to fight another day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Russ. And Kenyoki, you're back with us. You froze when you were talking before. So
I know. I'm so sorry about that.
that's okay. So yeah, please introduce yourself. And then Diamante, I did kick it back over to her. So if she wants to reintroduce herself, so you guys were looking to engage. So go ahead.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. I am Kenyoki Kroll. I'm the Senior Vice President of Clinical Services for Highmark. And my team has responsibility basically for any of the clinical operations of the health plan. I have been with Highmark Health for about 4 years. I was on the Allegheny Health Network side just until about 4 or 5 months ago, and moved over to the health plan side. And prior to that, lived in the Cleveland area and worked for the Cleveland Clinic for about 16 years before moving here to Pittsburgh. So happy to meet everybody this morning.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Diamante,
Nice
you want to give
meeting
a quick little summary again, or?
Sure, I'll give my elevator speech again. So I'm Diamante Walker. I am the Deputy Executive Director of the Urban Redevelopment Authority. And so similar to you, Kenyoki, I handle all of the URA's operations and sort of the performance management of the organization to make sure that we deliver on what we say we deliver on without fail. And so I've been with the URA for about 3 years, came in as the MWVE program officer and sort of, worked my way, like as I became more familiar with the operations and the compliance needs, that role changed over time. And so I do come from the for-profit sector, for-profit education management, where I spent most of my career. I did serve briefly in the nonprofit sector at a community development corporation. And I've been finding that, that the government and the public sector is a nice intersection of both of those confluences. And I've, found that we've needed those relationships more now than ever in light of what's been happening in the country and in our city.
Yeah.
So it's very nice to meet you, and I'm a big fan of operation roles, so I'm really interested to hear about what you do.
Yeah. Well, today it is a smaller group, and it was so funny, like I said, with it being Labor Day, I didn't even realize the date, but I think we're going to have a great dialogue back and forth based on the topic and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome everyone to today's Executive Roundtable. It is innovation during disruption and how industries are forever changed. So one of the recent studies from McKinsey actually came out, and they were talking about how companies and executives that they've surveyed, they really are not innovating as much. Actually, it is down to only 23% from where it was up in the 50s. It was actually at 56% pre-COVID. Now it's down to 23. Feel that they are really investing in innovation. Most say post-COVID, about 50%, it'll rebound back to 50%. Although studies have shown that those that invest in innovation, even during a crisis, 10% do better than their peers as well as their competitors during a crisis, and then 30% actually have a higher increase of return on investment and advantage over their peers post crisis then too. So it is really important to still be looking at how to innovate and how to utilize technology with your overall business operations as well as your interactions to your consumers and your customers. So what I just kind of want to get your overall thoughts on like those stats and what you're thinking about before we really jump in and talk about how each one of you are innovating currently and everything. So what's everyone think with the decrease?
So I'll start first. So that was a great lead-in, I think, and I think innovation is key, but the fact remains that most people are creatures of habit. Change is difficult. Change is makes people feel uncomfortable, and I think human nature and sometimes organizational culture and nature is not to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think sometimes it takes longer to innovate because of that. I do think innovation is important. I think it is part of survival, because if you're not innovating, you're actually falling behind. You're not even keeping your ground. So I think it's necessary. And I think what we've seen over the last several months with what's happened with COVID is that people have innovated more in a very short period of time than they had done in years before that. So it is possible, and people can adapt and adopt. And I think that though it moves at a faster pace when you have no choice, which is what we've kind of seen over these last several months of what's happened in every industry.
Yeah.
So I think although there's been a lot of bad and challenging things with COVID and over the last several months, I think that as a society, we have developed some muscle memory related to change that may serve us well in the future. That's just my thought on that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say muscle memory. Like I said, I think we're working a muscle that we were so apprehensive to use. And that is to take the leap of faith, to take that risk. But we didn't have a choice. We had to really, it was either a sink or swim, you know what I mean? March when they were saying we have to shut down and you couldn't have that direct interaction. So what were we going to do? So totally agree. So Russ, Diamante, any feedback that you want to give, a discussion?
You know, there's not much more that I can add to what you said, but the only thing that I will say from a leadership perspective, I do think that this is the moment where the visionary leaders that people thought were crazy 6 months ago when they were, or a year ago when we were asking, you know, for certain innovations or to change things, and people are naturally resistant to change. And one of the things that I think is super important when you hold roles like we do is to challenge and push systems a little bit, because I was always operating like COVID was a thing that was going to happen, even though I didn't have a name for it. And so, for me, it was just disruption. There could be something disruptive to the way that we understand and do business, and how can we pay attention outside of our own little slice of the world to start to prepare for some of that. And so I've been very transparent in talking about this. And the URA on March 16th was tethered to PCs, where you could not work remotely like I could, because I had a laptop and I kind of did some innovation for myself, but it's something that I wanted to democratize across the agency. And there were a lot of well-meaning questions. I mean, people who were like, well, why do we have to do this? Why are we transitioning to laptops? Why do we have to spend money on a stronger network? And we made all of those investments October, December of 2019. So when we got to March, we were in the middle of that change, as you said, but then it accelerated. But we weren't completely out of our depth, because my thing was we cannot allow anything to keep us from meeting the deliverables for our clients and for the city. We serve the city. We don't serve ourselves. So how can we position ourselves to do that effectively?
Yeah. And Russ, being, you know, in your industry, you very much were day to day interacting with your clients and very, you know, in person, one-on-one, and your entire team. So what are your
and Kenyoki, I love the term muscle memory around change. I mean, that just really resounds with me. You know, and for many, it was just based off survival and trying to, you know, we were really lacking as an organization in our IT infrastructure, and we had to really scramble to get. I mean, we were, as Dimani mentioned, I mean, we had we had 60 people who, were tethered to a desk every single day, 5 days a week, and to get them to work remotely was a challenge, but we got there. In just, I think the key point is I'm trying to make is, when it comes to, you mentioned it, when it sort of has that voluntary stigma to it, there's always resistance. But when it's a matter of life and death, not to make it morbid, but people start to accept. And I mean, I'm seeing it, more recently with my team, and just how people are now becoming accustomed to say, yeah, we're on somewhat stable ground, and we have a business to run, we have payrolls and overhead to meet. We can continue to do basis. This is not the way we did it for the last 30 years, but life marches on, and we're ready to right back to where we once were. So
yeah,
I think it was really well said.
Yeah. And so that leads into really our first discussion point of the entire Executive Roundtable is utilizing technology to replicate business processes and scalability. So we've talked about not only our computers, fundamental to everything that we do, in laptops especially, but then looking at like the systems for automation, for communication now, for video conferencing and everything like that. But as executive leaders, we have to look and measure really that risk versus the return on investment, and be really aware of what's happening, because our bottom lines are affected, or our ability to stay fiscally operational and sustainable then too. So we have to look at that and have that true understanding and basis for that analysis. So understanding that, for your ROI, obviously it is the safety factors, your efficiency, your connectivity then to those that you serve, as well as to improving those products and services to meet the needs, especially now, because I don't foresee this going away as tomorrow. You know what I mean? Even if there is a vaccine here before the end of 2020 or into 2021, there's still going to be some that aren't going to get the vaccine. It's going to be here. It's going to be there. So, I know one reason why I had Kinyoki here, and I really wanted to talk about, you guys were already in doing a lot of things to remotely work with your clients. But Kinyoki, can you talk to us a little bit about the efforts that Highmark and Allegheny Health Network have taken to really be proactive and interactive during the pandemic to meet both the patients as well as the public needs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I am still amazed looking back about how quickly we pivoted. I mean, literally overnight. And I was part of the leadership team that was of the work from home, how do we get thousands and thousands of people work from home? How do we, for those that can't work at home because they're direct patient care, how do we make sure they're safe? How do we make sure that when we can provide care virtually, that we can do that as well too? And it was amazing to see there were so many things that we were doing but had not pushed the envelope on for a couple reasons. If you're talking about direct patient care, the consumer doesn't have an appetite for telehealth or virtual visits. They just don't. Well, we found out they did. They did, to the tune of, if we look across our entire Highmark footprint on the health plan side, 30 times more telehealth visits this year compared to last year. I think we were at about 60,000 across our Highmark footprint, which is Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Delaware. Last year at this time, we were at 1.8 million telehealth visits as of August 15th. So you can't even wrap your mind around that. Things we thought would not be meaningful to provide in that setting are meaningful. About 40% of our telehealth is behavioral health, believe it or not. Because you think there's a lot of people that have behavioral health needs, they can't go see their provider, that need or diagnosis does not go away. Primary care was a second one. So we pivoted overnight. We had doctors that were used to laying hands on patients every day, now doing that from their home or doing that elsewhere. We were still able to take care of people. We had a lot of work within our enterprise where we had case management teams going out to visit members, visiting people in the hospital. We learned that we can do that effectively through phone. or through video chat, FaceTime to connect with people, which was something that we didn't do that much of anymore. We also learned that people's needs were different and we had to pivot on terms of what we were providing. So some people were isolated. How do we help them from not needing a behavioral health provider or plugging them in with one if they need one because they're elderly, they're isolated, they can't see their family, they're struggling in one way or another. So I think in terms of the people we serve, that was how we pivoted. I think also when you just look at general business processes, I think the conservatism that a lot of organizations applied to business process has really changed a lot. And we've seen that it doesn't affect how we're running the business. We're still taking care of things. We're still serving the people we're supposed to. We're still running a good business. But before we had so many rules around who could work from home and who couldn't, and what you had to have in place to do that. 6 months ago, if you were on a call and a doorbell rang, or a kid was screaming in the background, or a dog was barking, we would consider that person unprofessional. Now it's just another day in the life, and we're still getting things done. So I think it has been a remarkable journey for me to be a part of what we've done as an organization. But I think it has shown that you can innovate, you can still check all the boxes. And in some cases, I think we're doing better work than we were before in some areas because we were forced to fail fast and then fix it and found out that the result was amazing.
Yes. Oh, that was fantastic. Yes.
Yeah. And that
Great.
stigma, like you said, of what professional truly is.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what, as executives, we all were guilty, I'm sure, of stating, when you're not doing this, you'd bring the employee, you'd have that conversation and everything. Well, we weren't being good executives. That didn't mean they weren't being productive. So it's completely a mind shift and everything. So Kenyoki, what degree do you really feel these operational changes that Highmark and Allegheny Health Network has done will remain post-COVID? Are they there for everlasting, the flexible work schedules, obviously the remote access to care and everything?
So I think in terms of how people are working, I think that a lot of that will remain a part of our DNA going forward. We may change it a little bit. We may need to look at how we optimize it better and continue to evolve the model. But I think there's a certain component of that is permanently part of our DNA that will be how we function. And I think that's a good thing. I think in terms of care, I think virtual health is here to stay. What we've seen over the last few months as things have started to open up is that we've started to settle back into probably what will be the new normal, where it's about 70% in person, but still 30% virtual. But 30% virtual is still huge compared to 6 months ago where it was 1 or 2%. So I do feel that a lot of it has stayed. And I think what we have to do is we have to start innovating in those new spaces that we live now, which in some cases is foreign to us and something we've not done. And I think that'll be the challenge, to keep taking care of business, keep being innovative and cutting edge, to really innovate in areas and spaces where we did not have to before because it was such a small piece of what we did.
Yeah. Well, great segue into what I'm going to open up to everyone here. So what challenges do you foresee lying ahead, either with technology or operations, maybe in the ongoing economic disruption and the health crisis that we're still working with? Or will we just, like you said, work that muscle and just work through it, where maybe they won't be so severe of challenges anymore? So let's open it up and have a dialogue about this.
I think at the end of the day, we're still going to need physical proximity on some level to be really effective in the things that we do. I think that we've been able to reframe how necessary it is and when it's appropriate and when it's essential versus making it the norm. And one of the things that I wanted to add to what Kenyoki was saying is that when you think about how you may hear my kid in the background, you may hear somebody cutting grass, next to me. And that may not color perception about me the way that it would have, 6 months ago. But what's been interesting is that when we think about it from a workplace equity standpoint, I hear just as many, men on the phone with kids that are like, daddy, they're dealing with the dog. And so it really has shown that this perception, again, about women in the workplace, and that these are the things that only women have to deal with, and we all have to deal with it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add a note to that I think that's great that we're all able to see that and be comfortable with that. It's so important. But the other thing that I've been thinking about is, what if this disruption had not been public health related, but it had been some sort of attack on our digital infrastructure, and we were then more reliant upon analog systems. And so the only thing that runs in the back of my mind is, we're dealing with COVID right now, and so we're all moving to digital systems, and we're saying this is going to be the new norm. Are we also prepared for what happens if something happens to the digital infrastructure, and now we can neither meet in person or in digital format? So I mean, and that is just a harrowing thing to think about. But this tells you a little bit about me. But it's like, and I think when thinking about that, though, it would help us to say, well, let's not do an overcorrection for the issue with not being able to meet in physical proximity, so that we can find that equilibrium state that allows us to pivot back and forth should we face either one of those cataclysmic scenarios.
Great point.
That is a great point.
Yeah. All right, if there's nothing else, one thing that we really want to talk about, and we have been mentioning, is prioritizing safety of the consumer as well as your own staff for the interaction, while being still innovative on your service delivery and maintaining quality and, product development then too. So one thing that we were taught is we are very capable now of having that same interaction and expression and capability to engage and kind of reach across the aisle and have the dialogue and provide those services. But by doing that, then, and Diamante, this is why I went to you with this question. I know data allows us and drives us for what we do, not only on data, what's happening now, but then data, what's happened historically, and then forecasting of where we really need to go. So being able to prioritize and shift and be nimble then too. So, and addressing those core and systemic issues that are always have been happening, but are really, really emphasized now, especially with COVID-19, a health crisis and everything. So Diamante, in what ways has the Urban Redevelopment Authority been purposeful in utilizing all of the following: innovation, strategic thought, partnerships during this economic and health crisis, and even civil distress, to transform our region as well as our communities?
That's a great question. And so, I mean, it's been transformational for us. And I don't believe that you ever waste a crisis. I think that there's always a way to, if you're a learning organization, to begin to adapt and grow and use that as an opportunity to make those changes that need to be made, but we're just too terrifying or too big before to make them. And I think, Russ said, this was about survival. Mm-hmm. And so that was very much the way that it's been for us. We were like, yeah, we want to survive. We want our clients to survive. We want, the stakeholders that we work with to survive, but we want the point of that survival to be ultimately that we want to thrive. Like, that's really the North Star. How do we thrive in the new normal? That is possible. And so for us, it has meant a complete reframing about why we exist. So instead of running, like the instinct is to run exactly to what it is you do and how you're going to do it, we took a pause with our board and said, let's explore a little bit about why we do what we do and who we serve. And if we start there, the how and the what start to make, those things are easy. You get on Zoom, you get on Teams, you develop e-notary so that your closings can still occur. Like, we will figure those things out. And so we know that we were boiling the ocean, that we were taking on really, really big things, and the ocean was not getting any warmer from our efforts. And so we said, how can we boil the thimble? How can we figure out where we occupy space and what we're really good at? And then what partners do we need to help make us better at the things that we need to do and where there's an intersection? So we sort of boiled it down to, we know that we need to do major development in the city of Pittsburgh, but we want to do that development around the social determinants of health. How does it impact quality of life? How does it impact economic mobility? We know that that's why we're going to do major development. Secondly, it's housing, it's business, it's workforce. That's what it is. And so that really, to get into that strategic focus, then we were able to think about, well, what tools will allow us to have an impact there? So I'm going to give you a statistic. In 2019, the URA did about 67 loans, small business loans, with the resources that we had. In 2020, we did 67 loans by April.
Oh, wow.
We did 67 loans by April because COVID said businesses are in trouble. So dollars that we weren't looking at before, partnerships that were like completely, we just weren't exploring, we were like, well, wait a minute, like our small business sector could collapse. The borrowers we've already been working for are on the brink of collapse. So we had to rethink those instruments, rethink those tools, and see them as resources for the people and not necessarily solely resources for the organization. So that was one way that we had to pivot. And out of that, so the URA had been pivoting since 2017. I said I came on and did a lot of MWBE work. And what we found were that, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, small businesses that are economically disadvantaged needed a redevelopment authority to focus on their needs. So we created a micro loan fund. And this is a loan fund between $5,000 to $30,000 because the data said that folks were not looking for $200,000 in capital. They were looking for $10,000, $13,000, get a little bit of inventory, and just kind of experiment and try to do an entrepreneurial endeavor. And there weren't a lot of low interest rate loans available to do that. So our micro loan program was born out of that. When COVID hit, we were able, because we had already been working on that micro loan program for a year and a half, it transformed into our emergency recovery loan fund. If COVID had happened in 2018, the URA would not have had a micro loan program. We were only offering gap financing. We would have had to build an entire program that we would not have been suited or staffed to be able to deliver on. So some of that preparatory work, I think, really benefited us from a strategic perspective. Like I said, we started asking ourselves questions a couple of years ago. So when we got to COVID, it was like we could take that work and leverage it and then really start to drive and deepen impact. And so back in March, if I needed to sign a document, we had to spend an exorbitant amount of staff time just to secure a signature. Somebody had to type it up, print it, make copies of it, drop it on every single desk, go back and pick it up. And today, I could sign documents right here from my phone through DocuSign, and we've not spent a lot of staff time or, so that's another way that I think that we've been able to innovate. But when we asked the question in our leadership meetings about should we move to e-signature, even 6 months ago, it was, oh no, it's too risky. Everybody wants ink. I've had a couple of banks come to me and say, I need ink. And so I've had to get in my car and go, and go sign something. But 99% of what I've done has all been digital. And the last thing that I will say and how that's impacted our customers is that, people have had a hard time paying their rent. People have had a hard time paying their mortgage. And so the URA it's a bureaucracy. It needs paperwork. It needs evidence that we're spending the public's money in a way that is responsible. And so we had people sending us stacks and stacks of paper in the mail. And so what we've been able to do is we've had a few folks who don't have access to digital divide. We've had a few staff members put together a protocol to go to these folks' homes, use an iPad, get their signature on this boatload of documents, upload it to the cloud, and we're done. And so that has been transformational. So we've been able to quadruple and quintuple the number of people that we've been able to help simply because the demand is greater, but our ability to deploy and to vertically integrate some of our systems has helped us to be able to do that. So it's been strategic thinking from the board level to we've encouraged our admins to think strategically. We have positioned our admins as leaders. They're in the weeds. They touch the public more frequently than I do, probably. So we really wanted to hear from them. Don't wait for Diamante on high in what I call the mahogany tower to tell you how to do something. You guys have got to think about how to solve problems, and you should feel empowered to do that. And don't let me, thinking up here at the 30,000 foot view, not enable you to do something that's going to work and make a difference. And that wasn't our culture before. And we've really had to shift and pivot our culture to empower ideas at every level of the organization.
Yeah. And you bring up so many great points and everything, and this actually wasn't part of my question, but I'm going to make it part of my question because it was all about strategic partnerships of the, really talking about the public and the private sector of forging those partnerships. But I want to pivot that question a little bit about how are you guys then utilizing partnerships to meet the needs of really our diversified population here in the city of Pittsburgh and in our region? Because we have, different economic, socioeconomic statuses. We have so many different, what do I want to say, different people of different ethnicities and everything then too, because we are a sanctuary city. So how are you working with those private public sectors, not only operationally to say, sustainable and viable, but then also to meet those needs really on those fundamental levels of those that you serve? So I'll open it up to all of you.
So the first thing that I'll say is I'll highlight the relationship with PNC, the $10 million investment in the URA that was announced a couple of weeks ago. We are so thankful for for PNC Foundation's investment, but really it's because I think that both entities, when we started looking at, the issues and how these cross sections of populations were being adversely impacted before COVID-19. And so, we went out and said, hey, we have this loan program, we have these housing programs, that are really focused on the immigrant population, focused on Black communities and some of those, systemic issues that are being faced there. And we talked about how we had some commonality there. And we really started thinking of ourselves in terms of public enterprise. If you think of yourself as just public administration, there's no need for partnership. You're just administering what you already have. When you think of it in terms of enterprise, and really working on behalf of the public to grow and evolve and meet those needs, that is a much easier relationship to develop with the private sector. And so we've seen our foundation community show up in a way, that the URA didn't have those relationships before. So it's really about, you can't have a partnership unless you have a relationship. So we had to reconvene relationships with community folks, community groups, working with, in ESL providers to disperse our housing programs, and then talking to the corporate community and really positioning ourselves as a publicly interested partner that could help them achieve a lot of the things that they wanted to achieve, but it wouldn't make sense for them to set up infrastructure immediately to deal with some of those more nascent populations that are really directly within our wheelhouse.
Kenyoki, Russ, have you seen anything like with partnerships or the need maybe for partnerships just based on some of those areas, like whether it be language barrier or whether it be the barrier of a socioeconomic for your services and everything? Is technology affecting any of your services or ability to meet the needs of your customers?
So for our organization, I think technology has changed the way we deliver it. In a way that we probably wouldn't have anticipated before. I think also in terms of the partnership space, being a healthcare organization, we have seen either greater needs surface for the people that we serve, and we've got to find partnerships and organizations to fill that gap, whether it's the food bank and more food boxes and a food pantry at a hospital, whether it's connecting to community resources, whether it's just giving somebody someone to talk to who feels isolated. So I think we have seen some newer partnerships, but we've also seen that we've leveraged additional partnerships and started to think more holistically about how we best serve the people that we're here to serve. And I think technology has supported that. I think it scares me what Diamante said before of if someone attacks the technical infrastructure. I don't even know what to say about that, but I think that thank goodness for technology, because we would have been very disconnected from the people that we're here to serve without that, and it would have made it impossible.
Yeah, I'd have to say the same. We would have been in a tough spot without the technology there. Our business is very face-to-face, very hands-on, heavy in paperwork. And, it was nice to see the adoption across the board. On one side as a broker, we we have direct authority with 58 insurance carriers out there. So to see them, you know, a lot of them are very large companies and had the infrastructure were poised, I would say, to make that shift to completely digital world in terms of how do we move documents from one place to the other. Some of these things are there's sensitive information that we have to take care of. So it can't be done via email, routine email. How do we secure signatures, on these 300-page policies? On the small side of things, many of them were not 100%. I'd say maybe 80% or so offered relief to the small business community in terms of their premium payments, offered rebates, and really the technology kind of came into place to say, okay, if you have to mothball half of your commercial fleet, normally it's you have to remove plates and return of plates to PennDOT. That's not going to happen in the height of pandemic. So it was, how do we make sure that those things take place? It was pictures, being able to prove, even doing, video conferencing, to show, hey, we're locking these things away in a safe. But the just being able to communicate in a way that we normally hadn't done. I mean, there's so many businesses out there that, to us, our target audience that, they wouldn't, and prior to all of this, if you didn't sit across the table and look them dead in the eye, they weren't going to have a conversation with you.
Mhm.
Right.
Old school way of doing things. And it just perpetuated itself for, I would say from one generation even to the next, for that long. A lot of these are privately owned, family run businesses, and maybe a large general contractor that's in its second or third generation. The technology that we had there, to be able to kind of say, hey, look, us coming to sit across the table from you, that doesn't exist anymore. But we can still make, we can still provide the services we do. From the risk management standpoint, one of the things that I do routinely were safety walkthroughs to walk into a job site. Not so easy. Once job sites started to ramp up again, I wasn't a necessary part of that build, that project. I'm there providing an ancillary service to my client. So that made life a little bit more challenging, but being able to kind of use, just using cell phone technology, Zoom via phone. I was able to connect with a foreman or a project supervisor, and sort of have him walk me through a job site. And, that allowed me to kind of see what I need to see to make sure the programs that I'm trying to put in place for these people are being adopted and held up.
Yeah. It's very much just like our telehealth now. You take a picture and everything of like, what injury do you have, what ailment and symptoms and things. So that's, our
Right.
phones have, think about if our phones weren't little computers, what would we have done? So yeah, Devontae, again, your whole insight terrifies me, but with cyber attacks, we don't know where we're going. So that's a whole nother thing with, that brings us into what we're going to talk about next, is creating the safeguards for nimble and viable businesses and stuff. So now that we've gotten used to kind of being proactive thinkers, strategic thinkers, and we've gotten more comfortable with taking those risks and, stretching a little more on being more innovative and integrating technology. And everyone's gotten a little more comfortable with this. What modifications are all of you taking to create safeguards for agility if we have to pivot again, and to ensure that your business, can continue during any disruption that might occur?
I would say for us was creating making our workforce mobile,
Mhm.
period. As I mentioned earlier, of the 75 or so people in the whole organization, 60 of them, account managers, techs, support staff, we're tethered to a desk, and um, getting them to work from home, making that a secure environment for them to be able to conduct business and without seeing dip in productivity. I think that really strengthened our position in terms of whatever comes down the road next, we're going to be able to navigate through that easily. And I think some of the things we're kind of honing in on our habits a little bit more, particularly with so when the pandemic first hit, we had these large town hall type calls with the entire organization, which were great, which were informative, but we realized we need to ramp that up to have not just those town hall size meetings with the entire group, but smaller meetings in between more frequently, so that we didn't lose pace on our collaboration that we're working on. When you're trying to find who's the expert in errors and emissions or directors and officers coverage, I know that guy in the office. You know what I mean? How do we make sure that we're able to talk and bring any challenges and issues that I face, so that I can address it with these people in different fields and get their expertise. I mean, we're very much a team type of environment. So, creating those habits and those channels was paramount. That was helpful.
Mhm.
One of the things that we've done is we've created sort of a COVID response team, or that will probably become our crisis management response team. And what they do, they dedicate at least an hour every 2 weeks to updating our manuals and our handbooks and running the communication plan so that everybody understands what to expect in the upcoming months. And so the executive director and I look to that convening, which is represented by every sort of faction within the organization. So somebody there to think about our folks that are on our construction team that have to be out in the field. What are their safety concerns and needs? And then we, for our immunosuppressed population, that we don't know who they are, but HR knows who they are. And so they're always thinking about, these are the specific accommodations for you, because we know that when we do go back to the office, that you're going to need to be on some sort of modified, flexible program. And the other thing that we've really thought about is we said, well, instead of just making all of this about responding to COVID, how can we just change our operations and change our culture around flexible work, and really looking less at productivity in terms of time spent versus deliverables and outcomes. So that's really been, and we found that people are more creative thinking when they know it's like, hey, I don't care if you work 4 hours, if you deliver me 10 hours worth of work, because I've got some people who work for 10 hours and deliver 2 hours worth of work. So we just looking at that a little bit differently. And then last, what we have, so we've made the decision not to go back until January, but in the interim, folks still need access to the mail machine. Folks we have to sort the mail. So we've been using JotForm, and what we have is this sort of contact tracing mechanism where you have to apply through JotForm to get access to the building, no more than 10 at a time. And we provide all of the PPE that's needed to go into the building. And then, because it will, when you go in and say, did you have a cough? Do you have a fever? Have you not felt well? Is your partner not feeling well? And it will automatically kick you out as disqualified from coming to the site unless you can clear those questions. And JotForm is a very nice mechanism where it's HIPAA protected, and that has been offered to us for free because we are responding to COVID. So that's been another cost-effective way to use technology without doing a whole lot of expenditure.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And I would say in our organization, similar to what Diamante and Russ have said, so we too have a response team for COVID. It was kind of elevated level of crisis teams that were already in place, being in a healthcare setting. And we have used that group of individuals to really be the air traffic control for all things regarding response to this crisis. So to plan ahead, we're looking at what policies that we've pivoted need to stay, what others do we need to change to set up for long-term success, what are people's equipment needs and other needs they have. We just went through a pretty intensive survey process of all of our employees to say what's working, what's not working, and what do you need. Again, trying to make sure that we have a strategy that could be executed long-term if need be. So I think that's been really important. I think the second thing is processes and procedures. And I heard that from others as well, but you really have to have lock solid, tight procedures and processes when you're working in this virtual environment. And also in terms of training, how are you training new people coming into the organization? There's no in-person orientation. There's no job shadowing with a colleague or a training class. How do you do that virtually and set someone up for success? And then how do you make them feel welcome in your organization also, because they're a new employee in an organization and they've never met anyone that they're working with. So that's the second thing. And I think third, and this is really more of just my own personal viewpoint on this, I think I have learned, and I've shared with my teams, the absolute importance of acting with purpose and intention in this virtual environment, because there's so much business and so many connections that would have been made previously in the hallway conversation, or running into somebody in the cafeteria, or other types of social settings or chance interactions, but that were very meaningful for building great working relationships and very meaningful and impactful for getting work done. In this environment, we've got to be more intentional about how we go about doing that, because those opportunities no longer exist for us.
Absolutely. And so I know we're coming to the tail end, but I don't want to miss on this, because we actually, throughout our entire conversation, have been teasing this whole thing about workplace culture. And so it's so important, like you said, Kenyoki, that's what I do, process and procedures, and ensuring the right people are in the right seats, and ensuring that we're thinking that way of, all right, through all of this, we've had to change. We have to have those individuals that have the mindset and the capability of multiple skills and abilities, and to level up. We're constantly training leaders now, management level and everything, through our entire staff members and everything. So how do you as executives really handle change management when there's adversity to change? So Kenyoki, I think this goes back to your statement from the very beginning. So just want to have that dialogue before we get off of our executive roundtable and get your insights on that.
So I think I always go back to really, with my team, before I'm talking about huge change, and certainly there's been lots of change, go back to what's the why? What is the why? And what's the value proposition around that why? Because I think change is hard for people, but they have to understand it's larger than just them. We want to make sure that we're recognizing people's wants, their needs, their concerns. We want to make sure that we're being respectful of people, but you have to go back to the why. And people have really responded pretty well to that when you explain to them and be very transparent and honest about, this is the why of why we've got to change A, B, or C. I understand that these things will work extraordinarily well, and that these things will challenge us. And these are the reasons why they're going to challenge us. And just being very transparent and very honest. People respond to honesty very, very well. What people don't want is for you to put icing on something and pretend it's beautiful and it's a hot mess underneath. People, you've got to be real with people. I think it's important as a leader. You've got to show conviction. You've got to show leadership. you've got to show that you can make difficult decisions. But also as a leader, you're not going to make everybody happy all the time. And if you are, you're probably not doing something you're supposed to. And I think it's important to just be very honest and transparent about that. And I think people respond to that. And I think people, even if they don't agree with what you're doing, they respect why you're doing it, and they will usually support it.
That's so true. That is such a key takeaway. And, you know, one of the things that I've stressed with our staff is that change is a universal law. It's a constant. We don't get to opt into whether or not we want to experience change, but we can be very intentional and thoughtful about whether or not we'll struggle. And so part of what we've had to do is, you know, we've had to say change for us is growth, change for us is opportunity. Everybody probably doesn't survive that change or opportunity the way that we would hope, but, you know, we want you guys to feel like change is happening with you and not to you, even if you don't like all of the outcomes. And so we've been looking at the appreciative inquiry model, which really tries to focus on what is working in the organization and how can we take what we know about what's working well and use that to inform and to improve the practice of areas that are not. So that it's not that we're changing, we are expanding what works. And that means that things are going to shift. So change is hard, change is difficult. But I, you know, my thing is if we're not changing, we're not growing. And if we're a learning organization, we'll be fine. If we are not, if we're stagnant, then change is going to be really tough.
Yeah, I kind of circling back to Kenyoki, that transparency is a key to getting adoption whenever you're going through a process of change or migration in any way, shape, or form. And it's got to be a top-down led type of thing. You need your boardroom to get out in front of it. And, you know, if it means, you know, when people, you know, further down the totem pole start to see, you know, this is what our executive leadership is doing, and I see them engaged in this work. You know, they're out front of the change leading. You're going to have a far greater probability of buy-in and getting people to adapt to that. So, yeah, I just want to throw that part out, that, you know, that the transparency piece is clutch.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for joining us here today for our executive roundtable. Your insights have been phenomenal. The dialogue back and forth has been great, and hopefully you've gleaned something out of all of this. We do our executive roundtables. We started this back in April in response to everything that was going on. So our next one will be October 2nd, and we'll be talking about building a strong culture to recover for fourth quarter. So kind of building upon what we just left off on. We'll be talking about investing in management and creative teams, creating that recovery playbook for long-term strategy of resiliency and sustainability, and what does that really look like within your organization. So hope you can all join us. I know there'll be more people, but like I said, I do keep it small for this very purpose, to have this dialogue back and forth, because I think it is so beneficial. So I want to thank you all, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks. Nice meeting everyone.
Nice meeting
Thank you all.
guys.
Have a great
Bye.
day.
Bye-bye.